Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of High Energy Girl. In order for more people to hear these awesome shows, will you please do me a favor and head on over to iTunes where you can leave us a rating and review. This helps more people find the show and learn from these awesome guests. And I will appreciate it so much. And today I'm super excited to have Elizabeth Yarnell as our guest. Elizabeth has a mission to improve lives simply by changing the way we think about food. Inspired by a 1999 diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, she is an award-winning author, patented inventor, educational entrepreneur, and board-certified naturopath, obsessed with the connection between what we eat and how we feel. She shares research from the Fight MS with Food project on her healthy eating and natural lifestyle blog, Effortless Eating. Her TEDx talk titled Poisons in Our Everyday Foods raises awareness of the dangers in our food supply, and her breakthrough cookbook, Glorious One Pot Meals, will be celebrating its 10th anniversary in 2019. Dr. Yarnell runs a nationwide food sensitivities and dietary therapy clinic and speaks about health, diet, and autoimmunity. I am super excited for you to hear the show, so let's go say hi to Elizabeth. Welcome to High Energy Girl, a podcast helping women to age stronger, because it is never too late to get fit, be strong, and feel sexy. I'm your host, Tracy Gluheich, health coach and personal trainer, and founder of highenergygirl.com. Each week, we will either have a guest interview, which will provide you an actionable tip to help you age stronger, or I will do a solo episode that we will have a fun challenge for the month. Please also join our Facebook group, High Energy Girls. Looking forward to seeing you on the inside. Hope you enjoy the show. If there is a way that you could literally turn back the hands of time, have a better mood, more energy, libido, greater muscle tone, improved memory, healthier hair, skin, nails, I know I want healthier skin, lose the chicken neck, better joint flexibility and mobility, some fat loss, especially around the midsection, increased strength and bone density without having to swallow a bunch of pills. If there was a way that you could have all these benefits, would you want to know about it? Well, the answer is here. We have the only FDA-registered transdermal, over-the-counter human growth hormone product. To check out some juicy details, head on over to highenergygel.com. Hey, Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to learn from you because I know that you have a very interesting business and background, and I want to be inspired by you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I am a board-certified naturopathic doctor, and my whole journey began in 1999 when I went to sleep one night, as usual, and I awoke the next morning blind in my right eye. And I was, in short order, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And here I was 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, and what I was learning about MS was that 80% of MS patients have significant mobility issues, basically in a wheelchair, within 10 years of diagnosis. So I had the perspective, oh my gosh, by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. And I don't want to live my life that way. I don't want to sit around and wait for this to happen to me. So that's when I really dove into the world of natural health and started trying to figure out, well, what can I do to be more proactive about my future and make my life better, because really it matters the most to me. All the MS doctors would tell me is that, well, 250,000 Americans have MS. It's a neurodegenerative, autoimmune, inflammatory disease. We don't know why it starts and we don't know how to stop it. And all we have to offer you is these really super toxic injectable drugs that will shut down your immune system. And that's all we know to do.
Oh my gosh.
And that I tried the drugs for a little while and they made me very sick. And in fact, I had hives all over my body for 3 years. Like a good day was 30 hives and a bad day was 300 hives. It was really a terrible, terrible way to live. But it was my new husband at the time, who was still my fiance when I was diagnosed, and he was a competitive athlete. In fact, he was at that time 6th in the world snowshoeing.
Wow.
So he really said to me, your diet is crap. And I was like, okay, well, maybe you have a point, because all through the decade of my 20s, I lived alone. I had my own apartment. I either ate fast food or ate out at a restaurant or just simply skipped a meal. The only staple foods I kept in my apartment were gummy bears, Crystal Light, and Diet Coke. So maybe it wasn't such a surprise that by the end of a decade of that my body would start to fail on me. But I thought he had a good point. So I started researching the connection between what we eat and how we feel, and studying all sorts of respected sources like the ADA and the Mayo Clinic. And really what I gathered from all these sources when I boiled it all down was that whole foods were better for you than processed foods. And I thought, okay, well, the problem is that I don't know how to cook, and I don't really know what a healthy diet looks like. So I thought, okay, well, I think I can focus on a healthy diet, but I don't know how to cook. So I started taking cooking classes and watching the Food Network. And what I quickly learned was that if you want to have a whole foods-based diet, you're going to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, not only preparing the food, but cleaning up afterward. And I had MS, and fatigue is a hallmark of autoimmune issues like MS, and I didn't really have a lot of energy to spend on this. So one night, my husband and I were watching a late night infomercial. These are in the days before we could afford cable TV. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, look, I can make your whole meal in this one countertop appliance. And he puts in dry rice and a can of tomatoes. And then he puts a metal grate, like a barbecue grill type grate on it. And then he puts chicken breasts on top of that. And then another grate. And then brownies on the top of that. Covers the whole thing with a dome, plugs it in, and turns it on. Kind of I Dream of Genie-ish. Mm. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. I want to make my whole meal in one pot like that, but I don't have that countertop appliance, and I don't have any of those metal grates, and I don't really care about the brownies. So I went into my kitchen, and we had just received a cast iron Dutch oven as a wedding gift. And it was a little 2-quart cast iron Dutch oven. So if you've ever seen that, that's really small. And we had received it and thought, oh, it's so cute. It's like a bright blue. It's enamel coated, but I have no idea what I'm going to cook in such a little pot. But I went to my kitchen and I went over to my oven and I thought, well, I bet that countertop appliance that guy has goes pretty hot. So I cranked up my oven to 450 degrees and I loaded up some frozen fish fillets that I had in the freezer and some herbs that I had just pulled out of my garden and some vegetables, and threw them in a cast iron Dutch oven and put it in the oven. And about half an hour, just started to smell like dinner. And so that just really became the way that we cooked, my husband and I. And then we didn't really even think that much of it until my college roommate came to visit. And at the end of the week, she said, would you please teach me how to cook like you cook? And I said, but you know how to cook. Your mom is Italian. She makes these amazing, huge Italian spreads. And my friend said, well, yes, but the way you cook is so quick and easy and light and delicious every single time. I said, well, you've seen me do it. I just really throw everything in the Dutch oven and put it in the oven. And she said, I think there's a little bit more to it than that. So I sat down and I wrote out what I kind of considered at the beginning to be an instruction manual. And I spent 5 years trying to get an agent and a publisher to publish this book, and expanded it along the way and workshopped it and did all kinds of stuff like that. And nobody would publish it. So finally, after 5 years, I decided I either had to do something or abandon the whole effort. And at that point, I had a mailing list of a couple thousand people, and I had been doing health fairs and cooking demonstrations anywhere I could. And I'd even been on Rocky Mountain PBS, and so I'd been in 11 states, and I had a bunch of people who wanted the cookbook, but nobody would publish it. So I decided to go ahead and self-publish, which turned out to be the best decision I could have made, because in the first month, I sold out my entire first print run of 2,000 books. I won a bunch of awards. I was on the local bestsellers list for like 12 weeks. I did really, really well. And after a year or so of selling, I think I sold 15,000 copies. I sold the book to Random House, and then they republished it in 2009. And now that cookbook called Glorious One Pot Meals has sold 60,000 copies and is still selling.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's super exciting. And in 2019, this will mark the 10-year anniversary of that republication of Glorious One Pot Meals. So I'm very excited to celebrate that 10-year anniversary. So for a long time, I toured the country. I did cooking demonstrations. I taught cooking classes. And I really thought that the answer was whole foods versus processed foods. And that if everybody were to steer away from processed foods and focus on whole foods, that their health would improve. And in fact, it does. If all you do in your life to make a change is to focus on eating more whole foods and less processed foods, then your health will improve. But what I found was it wasn't the whole story. And I realized this because my son, who was born during this time, he was really sick from birth. And he was vomiting like 20 times a week, just all the time, until he was 6.5. He had terrible, terrible constipation. He would go 10 days without pooping, and then he'd be in awful pain. He couldn't sleep through the night because his stomach was burning all the time. So he woke up every 45 minutes for 6 years. So it was a tough time. And finally, I took him everywhere trying to figure out, well, what's the problem? We had his DNA mapped. We did abdominal x-rays. We went to pediatric GI clinics. Nobody could help us. And finally, I took him to a naturopath, and she said, well, I really think this sounds like inflammation. And that was really the first time I had really started thinking that inflammation could be the root cause of problems that weren't visible. Like, oh yeah, I know if I twist my ankle and my ankle becomes swollen, then I can see that inflammation. But there's actually inflammation that's going on in your body. And what I've learned since then is that really inflammation is at the root cause of all symptoms. Mm-hmm. So if you can focus on the inflammation rather than the symptom and reducing the inflammation, then you can eliminate the symptom and recover from that ailment. So at the time, this was back in 2008, I think, and my son was 6.5. So we found this blood test called the mediator release test, and it is a food sensitivity test, and really the gold standard of food sensitivity testing, because it doesn't look for antibodies, which are unreliable markers of inflammation, but instead it looks for mediator release. And the most famous mediator we all know is histamine. We know that if we have like a bee sting and we take an antihistamine like, say, Benadryl, then we could get some relief from that inflammation temporarily. But there are like 80 or more mediators that the body will release upon exposure to what it deems to be a threat. So once we did this MRT test and my son's test results came back, and 1/3 of the items that we tested with the MRT were inflammatory for him. 1/3, that was a huge number. It was everything he ate. Some of the most surprising items were the things that we thought were the healthiest. We thought, what a great kid we have. He's 6 years old. His favorite food is broccoli. He will eat pounds and pounds of broccoli. Turns out broccoli is one of the most inflammatory items for him. So that was part of what was causing all of his problems. There were all sorts of things, garlic, lemon, all these things we think of as healthy that were really inflammatory for him. So they were healthy, but maybe not healthy for him. Mm-hmm. And once we pulled them out of his diet, it was amazing. Before this, he had fallen off the height and weight charts because he was vomiting everything he ate. And within 2 months, he had grown 2.5 inches. He had put on 15 pounds. He had started sleeping through the night. He stopped wetting the bed like overnight. It was crazy. His mood became much happier. He started shooting ahead in school. All these things changed for our family. I remember one day about 3 months after we did the diet change, and I walked by his room and I heard him singing to himself. And I had never heard him singing to himself before because he wasn't a happy kid. So this was just monumental for our family, for my son, everything. And I realized that when I completed my studies and became a naturopathic doctor, got my degree, that what I really wanted to do was to focus on helping other people reduce inflammation in their body. And the MRT test is one of the tools that I use very, very frequently to help people do that. So now I run a nationwide food sensitivity clinic where I help people who have chronic inflammatory issues reduce that inflammation in their bodies and live healthier and happier lives.
That is awesome. And you just said a whole lot of things.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, it's just that I'm like, oh my gosh, and I totally believe in the food sensitivity testing. I've never heard of MRT though. I've done a stool test. I've done another different blood spot test, but I've never heard of the MRT. And is that something that they have to come to your clinic to actually do, or is it something they can do, like send in online?
So what the MRT is, mediator release test. It was created by a lab called Oxford Biotechnologies. They're based in Florida. What I do with my clients is because it's nationwide, I can work with anybody in North America, really. As long as you can FedEx overnight to Florida, you can work with me. So, we work over the phone, and they purchase the testing kit from me, and I mail out the kit, and I help you find a phlebotomist in your area. It usually costs about $25, $35 to get your blood drawn into the kit. I give you the prepaid FedEx mailer, drop it off with FedEx. It arrives in the lab in Florida the next morning. About 2 weeks later, we both get the results, and then our first conversation is a 2-hour-long phone call where we extensively review all of the results. We cross-correlate botanical food families, and together we identify the very, very least inflammatory foods. So the difference with using the MRT is that part and parcel with the MRT is what's called LEAP dietary therapy. So instead of sending you away with your results and saying, oh, you know what, you were reactive to A, B, and C, go home and avoid A, B, and C, which is called an elimination diet. Mm-hmm. And you go home and you're like, oh my God, A, B, and C, that's what I normally eat all the time. What am I going to eat? Okay, well, I'm going to try to figure out some substitutes and just randomly pick something else. So let's say wheat came up high on your MRT test, and you were like, oh my gosh, every day I have a bagel or whatever it is. What am I going to eat now? Oh, well, I'm going to switch to rice, and I'm going to get rice-based products or whatever. But what if rice is something else you're sensitive to? So when we do the MRT test and we review the results together, we look for the very least inflammatory foods, so that after that, I say, I only want you to eat X, Y, and Z. So instead of avoiding A, B, and C, we're going to create a diet for you out of X, Y, and Z. And that's going to be like 30 or 40 foods. And once we have those foods identified, then we're going to talk about recipes and where to find them and how to prepare them. And, based on your list, these are going to be good ideas for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for sweets and snacks, and even for safe alcohol to drink if you want to drink alcohol. Because my goal is to make this a sustainable way to live. Mm-hmm. So that after about 2 months, probably even less than that, after about the first month, it just really becomes, oh, you know what, this is just the way we live. Yes, I eat ice cream, but it's coconut milk ice cream. Mm-hmm. Or, yes, I have this bread, but it's spelt bread. Or whatever it is that is individual and based on your personal blood work. So the MRT, as opposed to the stool test, which I'm not a huge fan of, what the MRT test does is it looks in the bloodstream. And so we're going to the root cause of the inflammation. And if you look at how hypersensitivity reactions happen, they are initiated by a subset of white blood cells. So this is all happening in the bloodstream this inflammatory response, and it goes everywhere the bloodstream goes. So if you're looking at your poop, that's not your blood. That's like way past that time. So what we're doing is we're looking at your blood to see what's triggering those white blood cells and avoiding that stuff.
Oh, got you. And then with that same patient, do you do any gut healing, or do you do other things to try to, repair the damage that was caused by the foods?
So I know from my research and my work that nothing can heal in the presence of inflammation. Right. So I can fill you up with supplements and you'll just have very expensive poop. Right? So I'd rather, my goal and my practice is I have a 3-pronged strategy that I do with almost all of my clients. And the first one, or the centerpiece, is the MRT food sensitivity testing and the LEAP dietary therapy. So we remove the inflammatory triggers so that the body can start to heal itself. The body wants to heal itself. It's designed that way, but it cannot in the presence of inflammation. Mm-hmm. So we remove the inflammation. One of the things that we have to remember is that there's been damage to the gut. We've seen through the work of Dr. Fasano and his clinic and his thousands of bowel biopsies that they've done, that when there's chronic inflammation in the bowels and the gut, that causes damage, as you're just saying, leaky gut and digestive damage. So because the blood doesn't run through the gut, or else we'd be pooping blood all the time, the way that I look and see what damage has been done to that digestive tract is through a 24-hour urine collection. So I send you a jug, you collect your urine for 24 hours. I give you a little sample kit to send that off to the lab. This one goes out to a lab in Kansas City. They do their analysis, which I then turn over to the Loomis Institute. Dr. Loomis is the one that discovered plant-based digestive enzymes in the 1970s. And the Loomis Institute, which is also called the Food Enzyme Institute, they interpret the analysis and send me back a report that really says in clear English, okay, well, this person is having problems digesting carbohydrates or proteins or sugars, or maybe too acidic or too alkaline, or maybe deficient in electrolytes or vitamin C, because that's a water-soluble vitamin. We can see that one. There's all of these things that I can see through the urine that I cannot see through the blood. So we take the results from the MRT, we design the customized anti-inflammatory diet, which is seriously unique. It's like a fingerprint. It is unique to everyone. Mm-hmm. I've even tested twins, and they have radically different test results. And then we supplement with support for the digestive process. So to help you digest, assimilate, and absorb the nutrients from your foods as your gut is healing. And then the third prong that I do is an herbal parasite cleanse. I really believe that hidden parasitic infection is often at the root cause of chronic inflammatory issues for I would say 90% of the people who come to me probably have a parasitic infection.
Wow. So do you find that after everything that you've done for this patient, are they ever able to bring back any of those foods into their diet?
That's a very good question. So food sensitivities do change, and I rarely retest anybody, but I did retest my son, who's my guinea pig, after about 6 or 7 years. And what we found was out of the 41 foods that turned up reactive on his first test, now there were only 17 foods that turned up reactive, and out of those 17, I would say 1/3 of them were similar. So he had some new sensitivities, and some old ones never went away. So the answer for that is maybe.
Now, does insurance cover that test?
Of course not.
I know.
Insurance is only about pharmaceuticals, really, and surgeries, so interventions in that kinds of way. Insurance doesn't seem to really care about preventive healing.
They could save so much money.
I know.
Insurance companies, the government, everyone, if they would change that,
So I really am conscious of that with the people I work with. So my work is a flat fee, basically. I have an a la carte menu on my website, which anyone can certainly go look at elizabethyarnell.com on the shop page. And each of the protocols that I offer come complete with all of the materials and laboratory testing that you might need to accomplish, to get everything done that we need to done, as well as the counseling with me. So if you purchase the MRT test and LEAP therapy with me, it's a one price deal, although there are several different payment options. You can do a 3-month payment plan, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a one price deal, and you get the blood collection kit, you get the laboratory costs, you get the FedEx to the lab, and then you get all of the consultations with me afterward for about 2 or 3 months. And we have regularly scheduled phone calls. You have unlimited email access to me. So we work together to make this work for you, but you only ever pay me once.
Yeah, that's great. So let's get back to you and your journey. So you had multiple sclerosis. Now, were you already a doctor at that point, or
no? But in fact, I was always interested in helping people and interested in health. My parents are both doctors, so my life kind of around the dinner table was always medicine and healthcare, things like that. But I wasn't attracted to medical school, and I'm not attracted to pharmaceuticals. And so it was really my diagnosis that got me into that. For my career before I was 30, in my 20s, I was in film and video and television production for 10 years. I also was an instructional designer. So my job was I would go into Fortune 500 telecom companies. So super, super high tech. This was back in the 90s. I was really on the forefront of technology, and I would go in and untangle their computer systems and design training programs to teach people how to use them.
Wow.
So when I sat down to write a cookbook, I'm like, okay, well, the one thing I know how to do for sure, I don't really know how to cook. I never went to cooking school, but I do know how to break down a process into discrete steps in order to teach adult learners.
Okay. Well, that's cool. And so then for you had MS, and then you were diagnosed at, did you say 29 or 30?
2 weeks before my 30th birthday.
Okay. And then so you started eating whole foods. I want to talk about like your timeline from how your body healed from your MS to like when you went to school to be a DO.
Okay. So I'm not a DO, I'm an ND.
ND, sorry.
That's okay. Just for listeners, an ND, I'm a naturopathic doctor. A DO is a doctor of osteopathy. That's a medical doctor who has a little bit more holistic bent. But I am not a medical doctor. I focus on healing through herbs and homeopathy and dietary interventions. And I don't do anything that has to do with surgicals or pharmaceuticals.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And it's very effective.
Yeah, it's so funny, Elizabeth, because we were sitting around the dinner table with some really, really good friends of ours, and my friend's husband was like, yeah, I just went on cholesterol medication. I'm like, why? What's your cholesterol? And he's like, I can't remember. I'm like, well, what's your HDL? He's like, it's like twice what it's supposed to be. I'm like, well, what are your triglycerides? He goes, oh, they're really low. I'm like, well, why'd they put you on cholesterol meds?
Because that's what the cholesterol med companies want them to do.
I know. And he's like, Tracy, I'm sorry, you're not a doctor. I'm not going to listen to you. I was furious. I was like, you got to watch this documentary and read this book. You just have to understand, I was just like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I really think the whole cholesterol medication scam is a scam. Yeah. Because cholesterol is good. We need the cholesterol for our body. It's part of what helps our brains function, helps our blood vessels repair themselves. And these scales that the doctors are following in terms of prescribing Lipitor and all these cholesterol medications are created by the drug companies.
Yeah. And so I heard that it used to be at 300 before they would prescribe meds, and now it's at it's around 200, I think.
So cholesterol is not going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of side effects for cholesterol medications that could kill you.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I know. I'm really into all that. And I know that, there's so many other approaches, and our bodies need cholesterol. I mean, it's our hormone producer. So, okay. So let's go back to that question. I really want to hear about you and your health journey and how you were able to help yourself, because MS is a big problem. And I know that there's lots of people that, know somebody who has it or has it themselves.
It's true. And MS, I want to bring up that I don't think MS is unique in the world of autoimmune diseases. The way I approach patients is all autoimmune issues. I address them the same way because I really think the only difference is how they're manifesting. They're all due to inflammation. It's just where that inflammation is manifesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I've heard that before.
So, so for me, it took me, I would say, the first 5 years, I really was just focused on the whole foods aspect of it. And for me, that made a huge difference in my life because, as I said, before that, I was living on high fructose corn syrup and aspartame and food dyes, right? With my gummy bears, my Diet Coke, and my Crystal Light.
Yeah.
And those things are very, very toxic. And I can see now that I've done the MRT testing, that those are just some of the worst things for me. So when I just simply cleaned up my diet and went to a whole foods-based diet and away from all these additives and preservatives that are in our food supply, that made a big difference for me. And then when I got off the MS drugs, that's when the hives finally stopped. And of course, the drug company is like, oh, I've never heard of that side effect from our drug. It must not be our drug. You need to stay on the drug because you have MS. Well, I was on the drug and I was getting an MS attack every 11 months. And so it wasn't stopping my MS. So I went off the drug after I got my diet under control. And now I have not had a serious MS exacerbation since 2002.
Wow.
Which is a very, very long time in the world of MS. And I definitely have MS. It was not a mistaken diagnosis. You can look at my MRIs and you can see there are 17 plaques on my brain. There are spots all over my brain. I have MS. There's no doubt about it. What I have found in these intervening, 2002, 2000, 16 years or so, is that I can actually intentionally trigger an MS exacerbation in myself by eating the foods or additives that I should not. And then I can also resolve it and recover very quickly without having it linger for 6 weeks the way it used to back in the beginning, simply by avoiding that and going back to my clean eating practice.
So it just kind of eliminates itself.
Right. So I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. The most recent one I had was this last summer in July. We went to Hawaii, and I brought my kids down. We were at the hotel, and there's a little ice cream stand at the bottom of the hotel, and I brought my kids down, and of course there's nothing I can eat at an ice cream stand, but there's popcorn, and I was like, oh, I'll have a bag of popcorn. And we go back to meet up with my husband, and my husband looks at the popcorn, and he's like, that looks really yellow. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I was just feeling really obstinate. And I'm like, but I can't have the ice cream and I want the popcorn.
Oh, jeez.
And I ate the popcorn, and within 2 hours, I was slurring my words, walking like I was drunk. I could not walk down the hallway. I had to be supported. I don't know if any MS listeners out there ever read the biography by Squiggy. You remember Lenny and Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley? So Squiggy has MS. He might have passed now. I don't remember. But he wrote a book, and the title of the book was something like "Everyone Thinks I'm Drunk," and he's like, everybody thinks I'm drunk all the time because I slur my words and I stagger around and I can't walk straight, but it's MS. And that was the first time I had ever experienced that particular MS symptom. But the next day I felt hungover, I would say, but I was not slurring my words and staggering around. And within 48 hours, it was cleared from my body.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was the yellow food dye.
Oh, so it was the dye. Okay. Wow, that's crazy. I thought maybe it was cheese. So what foods are you sensitive to?
Oh, there's a number on my list.
Oh, you got a lot. Okay.
I did another trigger for myself with eating lettuce. So lettuce is on my list. So sad. And that would just be like any lettuce, iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, red leaf lettuce, green leaf lettuce, but not arugula, which is a different food family. So I can eat spinach and arugula and kale, but I can't eat lettuce. Avocados on my list. So that's one of the things, like even MS doctors, the medical community will advocate, oh, avocados are so great for MS patients to eat because their avocados contain unsaturated oils, which can help your nerves heal and repair themselves. And I totally bought into that. And for many years, I ate an avocado a day. And then I got my test results back and I'm like, oh, really? Avocados? And the last time I ate avocado, I had another issue. Sometimes even me, I know better. I've been doing this for a long time and the stakes are high, right? I don't want to get in a wheelchair. The stakes are really high for me to follow this. But even me, sometimes I'm like, damn it, but I just want that guacamole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And then I pay for it, and it's not fun for me at all when that happens. So on my list, those are some of the random things. Mushrooms are on my list. These are all things that make me very sad. Wheat is on my list. Cow's milk is on my list, but I can eat goat's milk, so I eat goat cheese all the time.
Oh, I love goat cheese. Way better anyway.
Yeah, me too. And you can get harder goat cheeses now. Like just yesterday I had goat cheese cheddar, and I get goat cheese mozzarella, things like that. What else is on my list? I don't know. There's so many things. I just tend to focus on the ones I miss the most.
Oh, yeah. Of course. The other ones, it's like, it doesn't matter. So when did you decide to go and become a doctor?
So I started studying natural health after my diagnosis, as I said, because I just didn't want to accept the fact that I was going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And if you have an autoimmune issue, it can be so capricious. Like one day you're fine and the next day you're not. And to have to suffer like that was really frustrating. So I started studying natural health and taking seminars and courses. And then when I wrote my cookbook, I realized, I really need some credentials for this cookbook. Nobody's going to just believe me that whole foods are better for you than processed foods if I'm a nobody. So that's when I started studying, and I began with getting my certified nutritional consultant certification. And then I went on from there to become a naturopath. And at the time, I was just interested in it. And I didn't think I'd ever actually practice as a naturopathic doctor. I thought I'd still be an instructional designer the way that I had been before. But then when I found out about the MRT and really could see firsthand the results that it delivered and the life-changing effect it could have, I realized that I did want to practice as a naturopath, but I didn't want to open a shop front and put up a shingle and see well visits or people who had sniffles. That I really just wanted to deal with inflammation and dietary therapies.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And so do you just work from home?
I do. I have a home office and everything happens over the phone and on email. And sometimes we do Zoom, depending on where the person is located.
Now, do you recommend that just the average person get that MRT test, or do you think that most people do it once they're sick? I mean, to me, it would make sense that if you want to age stronger, that you want to, have your best shot at it by knowing what foods will someday, at least if you're not showing symptoms, that someday they will show up.
So it's not a bad idea, and it's funny you should bring this up because I do have a little bit of a bias against people who are healthy who just want to do this for their own edification. And part of that is because you need to be a little bit motivated to go through a dietary change. And if you're not in physical discomfort, you might not be that motivated. But I tell myself and I remind myself, if you have the money and you just want to do it for your own long-term health and longevity and really clarity of mind and mental thinking, then there's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Well, me, because of what I do, I'm very interested in always improving my health. And I think that oftentimes when you have a food sensitivity, that you won't notice right away. And oftentimes, even myself, I didn't really notice things until I eliminated them and then brought it back. And then it was like,
Yes.
That was the reaction.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
And when you said the popcorn, I was cracking up because one day I went to the movies with my mom who has Alzheimer's and she wanted popcorn. So I ate some popcorn with her. And by that night, my right knuckle, which is like just my indicator, it was so swollen and painful. I'm like, I bet you it was the canola oil and the popcorn.
Or the food dye, or the MSG they might put in the salt, or, there's a million things. If you look at the ingredients on the bags, and when we first started testing and working with my son this way, I would go look at the ingredients on the bags. I'm much more conscientious with him than I am with myself. But I look at the ingredients and they're not all the same. When you go to like carnivals and movie theaters, they don't all use the same kind of popcorn, but they all have a bag and it has an ingredients label. Thank you, FDA, for doing something for us. And some of them are worse than others.
Yeah, I'll never do that again, boy. I'll tell you. But you wouldn't have noticed it until you really, really, really clean up everything.
Exactly. So your story shows me that you're already very clean and you're in an uninflamed place. So the people who usually come to see me, they're in desperate straits. They've often been to every doctor. They maybe have fibromyalgia. They maybe have chronic fatigue. They maybe have an autoimmune disease that's been diagnosed, whatever it is. Nobody's been able to help them. They've probably tried a bunch of drugs. Nothing's solving their issues. So they're ready to take the next step and really focus on this. Yeah. I tell them, I'm like, and they'll say, well, I don't think there's any foods that are causing my problems. But the thing is, if you are walking around 70 to 80% inflamed all the time, and then you eat something or you're exposed to something and it bumps you up to 90% inflammation, you might not even notice. But if you're walking around at 10 to 20% inflammation, like you, Tracy, and you eat something that causes you to bump up to 90% inflammation, you're going to notice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, even like salad dressing. I was at a restaurant with my mother-in-law, like a thing, and all I ate was a salad, and I'm thinking that the salad dressing had some like inflammatory oils in it or something, or maybe some gluten. I don't know.
Right. Or, depending on what ingredients were in the salad, it could have been sodium metabisulfite. So pretty much anything on the salad bar that should be turning brown that is not, like maybe sliced avocados or sliced mangoes or sliced pineapple, those things should be starting to turn brown when they're exposed to oxygen after they've been sliced. But if they're not, like if you buy a sliced mango from Costco in a clamshell, all that stuff is sprinkled with this stuff called sodium metabisulfite, which can be really inflammatory for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? That's why people make fun of me, but I never want to go out to eat. So, like my husband,
it's hard.
Yeah, our date night is now getting a massage. It's not going out to dinner.
So, I understand.
So, Elizabeth, how is your son now?
So my son is now 16 and very healthy and active. He still has sensitivities. So now he's 16, so it's harder to control him, right? He's very willful and stubborn. And sometimes he'll go out of his way to eat something that he knows I don't want him to eat, and then he'll pay for it. He'll have a migraine or he'll vomit or he'll have vertigo is one of his reactions. So But most of the time he's good, and there's even a lot that he can eat with his friends now that he can tolerate that he didn't used to be able to. What you find out when you go through this process, once you're cleaned up, is that there are probably really a couple of things that are your biggest hazards. So like for me, yellow food diet's one of my biggest hazards. For him, it's soy. And so if he can avoid soy sauce and things that have soy in them, he's much better off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think most people, soy's not good anyway. So,
I don't know. I don't have a problem with organic soy. And I test a lot of people and they're fine with soy. And, certainly there's Asian cultures who depended on soy for thousands of years as part of their diets. And it hasn't been detrimental to their health. But the problem that we have in this country is that 90% of our soy is GMO to begin with.
Yeah.
So if it's not organic, it's GMO. And then the second problem is that the soy derivatives, like soy lecithin and soy sauce and all these things that are kind of byproducts of soy are now added to so many foods.
Yeah, for sure. Soy lecithin, I see that in everything.
Mm-hmm. So you know what soy lecithin is, right?
Isn't it like the byproduct, like the garbage left after processing soy?
Exactly. So it's the sludge at the bottom of the barrel of the soy sauce after that's done. And they used to throw it out. But in World War II, when we were fighting in North Africa, and we had all these like tanks and machine guns and all these mechanical equipment in the sands in North Africa that were getting all seized up from the sands. And so they were searching for something that they could lubricate and grease down the tanks with. So they would run through the desert. And they realized that soy lecithin, the sludge at the bottom of the soy sauce, was great for that. So they ramped up production of the soy lecithin in North America and United States and Canada. And they shipped a ton over to North Africa, and then the war ended. And now we had this like whole industry for soy lecithin that was like, oh, but we're going to go belly up or whatever. And so what are we going to do with all this soy lecithin? And so one of the things they decided to do was to market it as a supplement, as a health supplement.
Oh my gosh.
And then other things they decided to do was bring it over to the industrial food industry, who realized, oh, you know what? The same reasons that it was so good to lubricate tanks in the desert make it really good to mix in with, say, chocolate to emulsify it and make it smooth. Oh. So it's really, really hard to find a North American made chocolate without soy lecithin to begin with. But it's in everything. It's in, they use soy lecithin in rocket fuel. They use it in fracking liquid, and they use it in aerosol sprays like PAM, cooking sprays.
Oh, wow. And so do you avoid it?
Oh, yeah, whenever possible.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Yeah, I always read the labels, and I try so hard not to eat anything with those types of chemicals in it. Like my protein powder I use has 3 ingredients, And so,
why are you using protein powder? That's another thing I have a problem with.
Okay. Well, the one I use is made with grass-fed beef protein, cocoa powder, and stevia.
But why? Why do you need more protein? Like most Americans get plenty of protein in their diets. Only weightlifters really need extra protein.
Well, I do it. So I usually have a shake, and I don't do it all the time. But number one is I'll have like a little bit when I do some almond milk yogurt just for flavor because I buy the unsweetened Kite Hill almond milk yogurt. Or I'll have a smoothie for lunch because I'm out in the car all day on the road. And so I'll just bring like a smoothie for lunch mixed with coconut milk. And so those are when I use it. So the almonds have protein in them. You wouldn't necessarily need to add more protein. You could certainly add cocoa and stevia for sweetener without the protein. So here's like going back to my Whole Foods bias. Okay.
Whenever they extract something from something and say, oh, we're just going to give you this little chemically extracted portion of the beef as the protein. Really, human beings evolved on this planet to eat the foods that are available on this planet, not the foods that are extracted from the foods that are available on this planet.
So eat the meat.
Eat the meat, exactly. I'd much rather see you like literally putting cooked meat into your blender than putting a extract of meat.
That totally makes sense. Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. And I like your idea of using the stevia and the cocoa powder to flavor my yogurt instead of the protein powder.
Right. And then I feel like if you feel like that you need protein to like keep your stomach more full, like what about nuts and seeds or even beans?
Yeah, I eat a lot of nuts and seeds. I live on a farm and we have walnut trees.
Ooh.
And yeah, so we have 5 acres in California and we live on a little organic farm, and so we grow a lot of our stuff here. But I eat lots of nuts and seeds and vegetables and meat. I do a keto diet.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of intermittent fasting. It just feels good in my body.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I'm out on the road, it's like I don't want to stop and eat lunch, so I want to just get my day done. And so that's why I bring a shake with me oftentimes.
So I would say if it were me, like instead of if I'm making a shake anyway, I've got the blender going, I might as well just throw in some walnuts instead of powder something.
I never thought of that.
You got them all around.
I know. I'm so lucky to have that. So, how about your book? Okay, so let's tell the listeners a little bit about your book and where they can find it. And because I'm running out of time, and I want to make sure that we plug you and what your website is and how they can find you.
So, my website is ElizabethYarnell.com. That's ElizabethYarnell.com. And pretty much you can find almost everything about me there. If you subscribe to my blog, that's where I'm probably most active, but I'm on, Twitter and Facebook too, but I do more on my blog. I've been a little bit in a quiet time as I'm ramping up because I have the cookbook, which is called Glorious, not Gloria, but Glorious, like hallelujah, One Pot Meals. And that's available on Amazon and, of course, on my own website as well. And, but I'm working on a new book about inflammation and the power of inflammation. And I'm about to launch, I think in 2019, a podcast called Accelerated Healing, where I'm going to talk about all kinds of different and alternative healing modalities that many people might not know about. Let's see, I'm often around and about. I give a lot of talks and speeches, and I have a TED Talk on my website that you can access. It's called Poisons in Our Everyday Foods. It's a lot of what we just talked about. Wow. Did I miss anything? I can't remember exactly all the things you just listed there.
I was just going to jokingly say, oh, is that all? You're awesome. And we'll put links in the show notes. So is your book available like at all major booksellers?
Booksellers have limited shelf space, so they probably don't have it on their shelves anymore because it is 10 years old. It came out in 2009, but it's absolutely available on Amazon or on my website if you'd like a signed copy, and I'll mail that out to you. And then, my tagline these days is because I should have been, now I'm 20 years past diagnosis. I'm about to turn 50. So I was almost 30 when I was diagnosed with MS. And I am not in a wheelchair, so I'm in heels, not wheels.
Oh, I love it. Heels, not wheels. That is cute. I love it. And that is a proper tagline for you, especially because, it's a miracle that you were able to do what you did. I wish that more people would actually look at their diet and, work on themselves from that perspective instead of just taking drugs that, are just not addressing like the root cause.
I agree. And anyone who's listening to this, come to my website, shoot me an email from the contact form, and I will offer you a free half-hour phone consult to see if you're a good candidate for this.
Oh, cool. That's so nice of you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And one last question. Where did you go to naturopathic school? Like, where did you do that locally?
I did that at Trinity School of Natural Health, which is based out of Indianapolis.
Oh, okay. And do you live in Colorado or?
I do live in Colorado. So it was kind of like an executive MBA program where there's online and home-based work. And then every so often you go in for like an intensive. I went for an intensive 10 days where we were in class like 12 hours a day. And I did a lot of weekend workshops as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long did that take to do it?
Let's see. I started studying in 2005, but again, my goal at that time wasn't to become a naturopath. And I got my degree in 2011. And then I passed my boards in 2013.
My son, I'm asking because my son is applying for PhD programs and they're all about 6 years.
Wow. A PhD in what?
He wants to do literature.
Mm-hmm.
So he's applying like at Harvard and Yale and, all the Ivy Leagues. And Berkeley is the only one that's not like an Ivy, and it's the only California one. So I'm like, I hope you get into Berkeley. Like, so we'll see. But he's really smart, that kid. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I bet. So, I bet. Sounds like it.
Anyhow, I wanted to let you know that I appreciate you so much, and I'm really looking forward to learning more from you, checking out your book, and I need to do easier dinners because I work so much that I love the idea of a one-pot dinner.
Well, you'll have to definitely check out the book. All you need is the book and a cast iron Dutch oven.
I have one of those.
Oh, well, then you have the expensive part. The book is the cheaper part, and it will change the way you live, really. Now, I have there's more than 250 testimonials up on my Amazon page that anyone is welcome to check out. Hear how people like it.
Oh, cool. I'm so excited for you, and I'm going to listen to your TED Talk, too. So.
Oh, great.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Have a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and I will be in touch.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for having me on, and to all the listeners, and it's wonderful to meet you, and I hope that you contact me and I get to work with you.
Awesome. Thank you, my dear.
Okay. Take care.
Take care, sweetie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. She is so smart. I learned so much, and I hope you did too. So go check out our website. And for complete show notes and links to all her social channels and her website, please head on over to highenergygirl.com/show. Thanks so much for listening, and make it a great day. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion, and I could be wrong.